Hello, my name is Anna O'Connor, and today I'm going to be discussing the universal design for learning. So, I'm going to start with a little personal story about my brother Timmy. My brother Timmy is partially deaf in both of his ears, and I wanted to highlight how UDL helps him succeed better in classrooms. The universal design for learning helps him in classrooms by putting sound systems in so that he can hear when something is loud, if all the students are being loud, or if he's placed at the back of the classroom. I chose this topic because I am an education major at Ohio University. I am currently in integrated language arts, which means I will graduate being able to teach 7th to 12th grade English. So that is why I chose this. Overall, the universal design for learning is an educational framework that allows students to succeed by removing barriers to learning and providing multiple ways for learning. Throughout this speech, I'm going to discuss multiple things. First, what UDL is, its core principles, there's 3 of them, and how it started in the late 1980s. I'm also going to discuss the barriers that it helps cross and how it affects the burden on student learning. And lastly, I plan to cover how UDL and its steps help include students and make them succeed better. So now that I've introduced my speech, I'm going to get on with what the universal design for learning is. So, according to the Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2008, the universal design for learning is a scientifically valid framework for guiding educational practice. And according to Patricia Ralabate, through this book called the ASHA Leader, the UDL started in the late 1980s due to 3 main things. First being advancements in architectural design, like ramps in a bunch of classrooms, and not classrooms necessarily, but in buildings and public buildings and schools mainly, following the passing of the American with Disabilities Act in the early 1990s. The second thing was the implementation of more education technology by Discovery at the time, where they created digitalized text to help things be read easier. And the last was, there was things found out about brain research. There was discoveries on 3 main networks that operate when you are learning, including the recognition, affective, and strategic networks, which I have highlighted. Here is the 3 main things. This is the recognition networks, this is the ramps on the school, and this is just a really basic sample of digitalized text. Then, according to the journal Opportunity in Crisis, the 3 core principles of the universal design for learning include the first one, which is multiple means of representation, which means that everyone will be able to have different ways, there'll be different formats for people to learn. So you could have something in print, you could have something on the computer, you could have something you could turn in a video, you could do something like that. So there's multiple different ways. Then there is also another one, which is multiple means of action and expression, which means that there's multiple ways for people to there's multiple ways for you to turn in things and do your presentation. So instead of just writing an essay, you could make a slideshow, or you could, design a little, one of those presentations, you could do that too. So definitely something that's very, you could do more hands-on. So there's for different types of learners. And then another one is, the last one is multiple means of engagement, which is what I accidentally said earlier, which is multiple ways to participate. So you can raise your hand, you can discuss after class, multiple different ways for students to show that they're paying attention to their learning, depending on the kind of learner they are. Okay, now that I've discussed those things, I'm going to move on to its barriers that it helps remove and how it affects the student burden of learning. So one main reason that the universal design for learning is so important is because it helps remove barriers in classrooms, which helps all students learn effectively. Some of the main barriers which can be encountered in classrooms include the lack of ramps for people that are physically disabled, loud noises, bright lights, barrier with English language, no sound system for students with hearing impairments, or could also be inflexible assignments. Not allowing things to be done in multiple ways depending on the type of learner is still inaccessibility. And there's also constraints on movement too. If you're somebody with ADHD and they need to fidget more, that is not very susceptible for them to work well. Another thing that the Universal Design for Learning does, it affects the burden of learning. It takes it from the student to the curriculum. So the traditional print-based curriculum that we have in most school systems now that don't implement the Universal Design for Learning, the burden is for the student to change how they want to learn, for it to work out, for them to succeed in class. They have to change who they are. But the Universal Design for Learning shifts that, where they make it so that the curriculum has to decide and help make the students succeed and work together. And it's more based on how it's outlined by the teacher to provide objectives, which I will get into in my next part. But yeah, so now that I have covered the barriers and how it helps the burden of learning, I am going to cover how it promotes inclusion by creating equal opportunities for success. So, according to the technological report by the University of Calgary called UDL and Program Development, we can see that the Universal Design for Learning does not mean that expectations for students are lowered. It simply means that there is more opportunity for students to learn and be successful in learning. So it actually improves the learning environment. Also, in an article, UDL meeting the needs of all students, my apologies. There are three main steps in the Universal Design for Learning. So the first one is to define appropriate goals. So when you're looking at your age group, you need to find ones that are flexible, but are also, you're not going to tell a 2-year-old kid to write out a math equation. Obviously, you don't teach 2-year-olds, but that's just an example. You need to make it so that it's flexible and it is it's appropriate for the learners that you're teaching. Then you need to assess the diverse student needs. So what everybody in the classroom needs. Does some student, I don't know, Billy, need to be able to get up and move for 5 minutes so that he can get his essay done in a timely manner so that he can make his brain work? Does Melissa need to go to the bathroom because she has a medical disorder thing going on? It's very being aware to know what each student needs particularly. And then the last one is to evaluate barriers. So what things in my classroom could make my students not be able to learn effectively? Are the lights too bright? Are there not multiple ways to teach this lesson? Is there only one specific lesson that you have idea without any additional formats? There's no translations available, there's no closed captioning, multiple things to think about. And then, according to the Universal Design for Learning in Program Development, we can see that, according to UDL meeting the needs of all students, some of the people which will succeed for UDL are people with sensory and physical disabilities, people with emotional and behavioral challenges, people with learning disabilities, people with autism spectrum disorder, people with barriers with English language barriers, and also people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. So now that I have given over what everything has covered, now that I've covered everything that I would like to cover today, I am going to cover what you should have got over. So overall, you should have taken that the Universal Design for Learning started in the late 1980s, early 1990s due to three main things. It has three core principles. There's barriers that it helps cross, and it affects the burden of student learning. I also want you to be able to tell me what its steps are and how it helps students succeed in the classroom. Also, what specific students help succeed. So overall, the Universal Design for Learning is an educational framework that helps all students succeed by providing multiple ways of learning and multiple ways of knowing. So next time you are walking somewhere and you go up the ramp just for no reason at all, you just decide you want to, make sure you remember that you have the Universal Design for Learning to thank for that. Thank you.